No, it's reduced to every single.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can swear.
Yeah, no, there has to be some incentive.
I think so.
I can swear.
Yes.
Totally.
In my life.
We're good? Okay. I'm not, I just,
Oh, okay.
okay, for fun, there we go. So since we don't have any officers yet, I'm just gonna start the meeting off and then call for the election of the chair. So anybody can nominate anybody, and there can be multiple nominations. There doesn't have to be a second. So you just call out who you want to nominate. You can make it a motion, it just doesn't have to be seconded, so.
Are there any particular rules about who can or cannot hold the position? Based on the type of
I'm
member
thinking,
or not? Just curious, I don't know.
Associate member probably, well,
I feel like, yeah, because we had, yes, because we
You
had,
cannot do associate, because
Right.
I've tried my whole hard.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You cannot do an associate member. You cannot.
That's what I was thinking probably was the case, but I didn't know.
that is
why I was-
correct.
I volunteer, but I don't know if I'm allowed to yet.
Oh,
so, and anybody except the associate members, so does anybody have nominations?
So if Nate has not been sworn in, is he still nominatable? I think was what he was asking.
Because it technically wouldn't fit whoever was the vice chair, then chair of the meeting. It's
right,
like I'm gone,
right.
but I'm here in spirit.
I think,
Yes.
So, other question is, can an associate member nominate the chair? Or no?
I think so,
Yeah.
probably, yeah.
Okay,
If you make it as a
They haven't
motion,
passed.
yes, they haven't passed.
okay. So we are at a point where we're able to nominate? I think Ed's been doing a great job, and nominate Ed. Sorry, Ed.
I second.
Bravo, bravo.
Hooray.
So you just do a roll call vote, so,
Well, unless there are others.
yeah, are there any other nominations? No? So, roll call vote, Pete,
Does he have to accept the nomination?
are you okay with that? Stephanie?
I stand by my statement of the previous year. I do not seek election, but will serve if called.
We'll let you pound the little.
Yeah.
Yay, the gavel!
All right,
I'm amenable.
Thank you.
Good.
all right, so Commissioner Keeler,
Oh, yay, yes.
all right, Commissioner Quinn,
Yes.
sorry, I forgot your last name.
Krupke.
Krupke, sorry, Commissioner Krupke,
Yes.
and Commissioner Reardon.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And then you can run it for vice chair.
I would be interested in nominations for the vice chair position within the Historic Preservation Commission.
So I am also willing to serve, but I'd be happy to have anyone else be vice chair if they were interested, so. Any takers?
One day we're gonna, we're not gonna be available for you. You're gonna have to step up.
So you're gonna be
That's
like,
not today.
You're gonna have to.
I nominate Lee.
I second if we second.
Commissioner Reardon has been nominated and seconded. Any other nominations? All right, I will call for a vote. We will follow the same procedures before. Commissioner Keebler,
Yes.
Commissioner Quinn,
Yes.
Commissioner Krupke,
Yes.
and I will also support this, Liam. So moved, and we stay as we were.
Been working well.
My dear representative of the city, would you like me to read our scripts or proceed down the agenda?
I mean,
I'm okay either way.
there's
I just-
nobody here, so I think you can proceed on the agenda.
Okay. Well, with the election of officers done, we have first on our order of business, design review for 16 Union Plaza, map lot 042-066. The Bangor Center Revitalization Area applicant owner is Mark Greenleaf. Approval has been requested for design review to add 2 windows and replace 4, and add 4 fire escape platforms. The property is located again at map lot 042-066 in the Bangor Center Revitalization Area. I would like to call the applicant forward to present their proposal.
They say if they were coming? No? Okay.
If there's no one here to speak for the applicant, I guess we'll move to public comments. which,
In the past, you all have voted to postpone.
would you like to
as well.
postpone?
I think that makes sense.
I would happily entertain a motion to postpone until the applicant can present for themselves.
Is
So
it-
moved.
Is it possible to, communicate with the applicant to ask for some additional information before he presents this?
I think so.
So I think in particular,
Would you like to table and request as part of the motion?
sure.
Okay. Commissioner Keebler, would you be willing to, since you said you implied earlier,
Yes.
would you like to make a motion that we would table the current application to another meeting when he's able to present with the request for
Additional.
information from Vice Chair Reardon, and then by all means spell it out? Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Take that as motion, yes.
Great. So I think one of the things that we would benefit from is a fair bit more detail about the location of the new windows, the location of the replacement windows, and in particular, the fire escape structures that are really going to change the facade, and we don't know anything about the structure, the material. I'm guessing it's kind of a platform that a fire department ladder would go up to, but if it is actually a fire escape, I'm a little confused about the awning on the ground floor. And it also appears that it's a building with 3 floors, and the sketch only describes the main floor. And so I presume that's not the ground floor, but, so anyway, those are a range of issues about windows, the fire escape platforms, and also whether these are changes to the 2nd floor or the 3rd story of the structure. All of those would be helpful in assessing the application.
Okay. Do I have a second for this motion? Because remember, this was a motion.
I second.
Any additional questions?
Any additional questions? Liam, I think you covered them. Then, yes, Mike?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, but I had a similar question to I think what Liam is referring to. On the photograph that was provided of the front facade, the windows, it's hard to determine whether the windows on the 2nd floor are the same as they are on the 3rd floor. So it's kind of important because they're proposing a double hung window. And what's in the bottom, what's on the 2nd floor is clearly awning windows and a fixed panel in the middle, so. That, I guess to further that question, be more specific about what the window is, what does it look like that's being replaced? Right,
Understood.
yeah.
Do you continue to support that second, Commissioner Quinn?
Yes.
And, okay. Mr. Keebler?
No, I'm fine, I,
No one.
oh, yes,
Yes.
I will vote yes.
Commissioner Quinn?
Yes.
Commissioner Guppy?
Yes.
And Commissioner, Vice Chair Reardon?
Yes.
And I will also vote yes to table pending the request for additional information. Okay. So,
I don't know the appropriate time to ask a question.
by all means,
In the materials we received, there was what appears to be a draft.
is it this piece?
Yes.
I was going to invite the city to speak on that after we got through some of our other stuff, actually.
Oh, okay.
If that was okay?
Yeah, sure. So this is what we do for planning board meetings, and so we're carrying it over to HPC as well, since you all do make regulatory decisions. The process is that you go through these draft findings and you make a vote on each of these standards. You can change the findings if you want. These are just drafts. We put them
Okay.
there to be helpful. And then after you finished voting on the standards, you would vote on the final decision. And the purpose of this is to really just make things clear about which standard you're voting on, and if you feel like the application doesn't meet one of these standards, first you want to discuss that, and then you can take a vote on whether you feel it meets the standard. And it just makes it really clear cut in case the decision does get appealed, so.
Yes.
So I think it's great to have this additional structure. I did have a question about the sort of draft form we're looking at. And it refers in part 4 to making our decisions based on exhibits 2 through 4.
Yep.
And that reference wasn't clear to me, like, what is exhibit 2 through 4?
So all the exhibits are listed under part 1, the record.
Okay,
Yeah.
the following exhibits, thanks, great.
Additional
Okay.
questions on that
Okay.
format?
Excuse me, Anya, when I have comments, would that be viewed as staff review information that could be plugged into this as well? Or how do you want it, or just keep my comments separate? Or how do you-
So when you submit your comments like via email, we put those in here as consultant comments.
Okay.
As an exhibit.
Just a thought, sometimes we get a lot of different exhibits, and I see they're listed. I was thinking maybe we could put a number on the actual exhibit,
Well,
so that when we review it, it matches what we're looking at on the draft.
we had that asked by the planning board as well. Unfortunately, it would be very time intensive to do that because you'd have to label it each page individually in the PDF. And we just don't have the staff time to do that. But
Oh, okay.
what we can try to do is just be more descriptive with our exhibit names,
Okay.
if that's helpful.
I think we'll also get the hang of it as it goes forward. I think the first
Okay.
time is sort of a new
Yeah,
form to look at, so.
okay.
Anne Marie, does that speak to your concern about pagination?
No, I mean, I still, if there's any way at all to do it practically, I would like material that we get to be sequenced.
And you're referring to the general packet that we've been
Yes,
receiving?
Yeah,
What do you mean by sequenced?
well,
Paginated.
actually paginated, yeah, I guess I should have.
So that each piece in it, including the exhibits and the application, would have a number order, or a number to it, assigned to
Well,
it?
that's what I was thinking.
Okay, but I'm just trying to understand what you're.
Yeah.
That could be easier than putting the numbers for the exhibits, but let me just ask if that's something we can do.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Since we're on the format there, any other questions or comments? I liked the structure, but I also saw the appeals board go through it, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. So,
No, I think it's good, I do.
or go through something similar. I can speak.
You should be thankful that you have much fewer standards to review than the planning board. They have a lot to go through, so.
I did hear through the grapevine that their packets were much larger. Okay. For those of us who are present for the meeting minutes, that is the next item on other business. So if you were present on November 14th, yes. Which means Liam,
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes for the November 14th meeting.
I wasn't there.
I know it was,
I have a comment, I mean,
Okay.
I have a question. Do you want me to do it after it's seconded?
is
or-
it part of the meeting conversation?
Yes,
Then let's address it before we move on.
okay. All I have to do is find it. Okay, so, meeting minutes. On the second page, well, it says, applicant Farron responded and described several of the opinions he had obtained and who they were obtained from. Reardon also asked for clarification regarding Farron's mention of the financial impact of the proposal. Farron responded and
Sixth paragraph.
clarified. I don't think he clarified in any way whatsoever. I think that he responded, but his response was not clarifying in terms of enlightening, historic preservation as to what was going on, because he kept saying that he couldn't get a price and that it was going to be very expensive and that people wouldn't give him a final amount that he had to start in, and so I just think we need another verb. He attempted to explain or didn't, I don't even think he attempted to explain, he
You
just.
could just say he responded,
Yeah. we'll just-
Period.
Yeah,
Like to strike and
responded,
clarified.
and strike and clarify.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
And then, let's see. Baron responded, this is on the third page, that he did not feel this would help as all roofers he had contacted refused to provide written estimate. That is what he said, and I guess that's all that matters, right, as far as the minutes go? Yeah, but did he give you the
Accurate, it's an
answer?
accurate recording.
It's an accurate recording, okay. And let's see.
Record.
I guess the rest of it that I highlighted
Okay.
was accurate in terms of what he said, whether or not it was accurate. It was accurately
Understood.
reported, you know what I'm saying?
Vice Chair Reardon, would you like to
So I'll
amend
make a
your-
motion that we approve the minutes with the friendly amendment to strike the words "and clarified."
In 1, 2, 3, 4, the sixth paragraph of the page of the minutes starting with, or starts with Vice Chair Reardon provided the applicant with a description of how the commission reviews applications based on the evaluation standards. And the first instance of "and clarified," as it is in there twice.
Yes, it's in the text. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Great.
Okay. And Commissioner Quinn, would you second that then?
Yes.
As there were only 3 of us present, I will start with you for a vote,
Yes.
Yes.
and I will also vote yes. Is that sufficient for minute approval?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Then we had annual training and a workshop on ADUs as far as other business is concerned. Commissioner Quinn did bring to my attention that she wanted to have something added to the meeting agenda. It would qualify under other business. I didn't know if we wanted to address that today or add it to a later meeting.
It's up to your discretion if you want to add it.
Emery, you want to talk about land banks? Commissioner Quinn?
I want to ask about land banks, and I have a couple of other questions as well.
Is it information that you need from the city that they might not be prepared to give you full information on today? Or is it for us?
No, it's for them, so.
Okay, so is it better to present the questions so that you can return with a response at another point? If it's not something you can answer today, is
Yeah,
that,
sure.
we can just put it in the record?
Sure, okay.
If it is amenable to the other members of the commission, I'll let Commissioner Quinn ask her questions before we proceed.
All I have to do is find them.
It's fine.
Please forgive me, my disorder.
Yes, you're welcome. Look, absolutely.
So maybe 2.5 years ago, I asked about land banks, and Anne responded, she was letting us know pretty quickly what was going on with that, and we've never heard back from it. And then a couple of times she said to me, oh, by the way, I'm remembering your land bank question. But now I would like to have more information on land banks and then,
More information on land banks.
yes.
Okay,
So we did internally look at the possibility of a land bank maybe a year ago. I think it was determined at the time that we could accomplish what we were wanting to with vacant buildings through other means. One of those being that the fee for vacant building registration increased greatly, and I think that has helped. That's not to say land banking's off the table, but it would also take a significant amount of staff capacity to do that, and I don't know if we have that right now. But it's certainly something, I mean, it's in the comprehensive plan, I think, as a possibility, so, you know, it's something that we'll continue to look at as an option.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So there will be a response, I mean, in terms of exactly what's been done and exactly what is coming of what will be done.
I don't know if I can provide a response on what will be coming because I don't know. I don't think anybody knows yet because we haven't settled on anything. Because other staff besides planning are working on different strategies for vacant buildings. But it's something that we'll keep on the back burner and I can bring up again
Okay, that
at
would
maybe
be
a
great.
staff meeting and see if there's any interest in that.
please. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one other question. Do we have any power of enforcement over with our decisions or with our inquiries? For example, some of us have reported different buildings that are in a terrible state of disrepair in the historic district. And that was at least a year ago. And as far as I know, nothing has been done. So is there any guarantee that we will get a response in terms of?
I can't make that guarantee. I have reported those to code enforcement. Unfortunately, again, there's a staff capacity issue, and oftentimes they're dealing with things that are life safety issues, like sewer leaks and things like that. And we are also dealing with, some staff have left in code enforcement just recently. But, we are continuously conversing with them about HPC stuff. And they come to us with HPC things. But, the other issue too is some people do have financial constraints, and that might be behind part of that. And I don't think there's anything we can do if somebody doesn't have the financial ability to fix something.
But
Again,
what if it's life-threatening?
well,
And I
there are, things they can do as far as placarded buildings when it comes to life safety issues. So again, all I can do and all we can do in planning is tell code enforcement, and they add it to their list, but I can't make a guarantee that something will be fixed because
Yeah.
I know they have so much.
I know this is the thing, it's the steeple on the Union Street Church. I mean, when a couple of us reported it more than a year ago, it looked like it could topple anytime. Now it really looks much worse than when we reported it. And that's in a very busy spot on the corner of Union and Main Street. And if that steeple comes down, there's a big chance that that's going to at least hurt injure somebody. It might be even worse than injury. I mean, it's really in terrible condition. So at least I think they should take the steeple down if they're not going to repair it.
And you said you have reported that to code enforcement?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think one other person, on historic preservation did as well.
Okay. I'll bring it up again. Yeah.
Just for the record, I want you to know that Maine Preservation produces a list of most endangered historic properties. I entered that one
Oh, thanks.
last year, but it was not accepted. They accepted other ones beyond this one, saying that the owner had some interest in repairing the building.
Oh, no.
It doesn't look like a thing has been done though.
Nothing happened.
No, in pieces now, chunks of the trim are falling to the
Yes.
ground.
Yeah.
So it's sad because the rest of the district looks great when you stop at that intersection.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful part of the city, and then you look up at that, and so, anyway, just so you
Well,
know.
it's just dangerous, very dangerous.
So I think that the last time this was brought up, I thought I remembered that we tried to help the owner get some, guidance in terms of funding, and perhaps that's why it was denied, because he might have looked into that, but then didn't follow through, so he's in like that weird limbo spot.
It's such a precarious place right now
Oh, it
that
is.
maybe what needs to be done is we have a small coalition of people, code office, preservation office, commissioners, staff, and whoever might have some funding opportunity and availability for a project like this. So they can, I think it's overwhelming to the owners right now, that's my guess, it's a big project. But as far as I know, structurally, Nickerson and O'Day looked at it about 10 years ago and seemed to indicate that the water had not had much effect on the structure at that time. So anyway, that's about all I know, but maybe we could do that, something like that, pull together a group that can meet with the owners and say, because they probably need some help.
Yeah.
In grant writing, I know they've tried to get various grants, and their grants are not prepared well, because I've seen them. So they need help there too.
I'm more than willing to help with
Okay.
that. I would love to meet with them and help, if that's possible. I don't know the person.
You can always meet as a private citizen if you wish the commission to issue support for you or to.
Yeah, then I
like,
would have to step down, obviously, from the panel if anything came for a vote. That works.
You would probably be in conflict, yes.
Yeah.
We'll call that as it happens, or if it happens, but if you were looking for, if there was something you wanted to coordinate and you were looking for the commission as a whole to support that decision or issue a statement of support, we did that for the building on Broadway. Help me, the Streamline building, on the historic
Oh, yes,
preservation?
the-
Yeah, so we've issued support
Vincent
before.
and Modern.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah.
That seems like something we could do if it was brought as a presentation.
So is it true that, then, that an historic building can just be allowed to deteriorate and deteriorate as long as the owner says he can't afford to do anything about it?
I mean, there is stuff in the code about
There is.
demolition by neglect and some options that can be taken. The commission can request a delay of 6 months, and then staff can try to work with them to find some funding to help restore it. So there are some different provisions in the code about that. They're not supposed to let it get that far. But if they determine, the fix, and then that's, one thing I was talking about in the presentation, but like, if somebody comes forward and they want to make a change to restore something and keep it from falling into disrepair, but it may not be historically ideal, that's something that you have to consider is like, and they should provide proof that they don't have the financial means to do that, but if they don't have the financial means to do something that's historically ideal, then you might want to consider providing some flexibility so you don't have the deterioration to the point where it needs to be demolished. So it's tricky, but
Navigable,
Yeah,
yeah,
Gatorade.
tricky, but navigable.
yeah.
Well, the house on Pond in Hayward is in such terrible condition that if the person who's living there, an elderly woman, were to come out the front door, she could break her neck because the stairs are disintegrating. The front porch is also in terrible condition. I mean, it's unfortunate we don't have some kind of fund that we could help them a little, I mean.
There are CDBG funds for historic properties, but I don't know the geographic scope of that. I don't know if it extends out as far as Whitney Park. But we do have some funding, and then there also is still, I believe, some legislation pending that would do a residential historic tax credit, which I think would help a lot with cases like that. I think currently it's just limited to commercial buildings. But yeah, it's difficult.
I think this is a slightly different subject, but one of the problems is that when people restore an historic property, their taxes go up. And so there's a disincentive. For example, I've been watching one piece of property in Whitney Park, and the taxes have just gone down and down and down as the property gets worse and worse and worse. So there's no incentive for those people who don't really care what it looks like on the outside.
Well, they do lose value in terms of if they were gonna sell it. So there's
Yeah, but
that.
in the meantime,
Yeah,
Yeah. So anyway, there is an incentive to let it go. The
Yeah.
incentive is economic. So I would love to see it go the other way, even if we're just a little bit. It's because to keep those properties in beautiful condition really helps the city. And-
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's why we're all here.
Yeah, that's what we're all here.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we can talk about with the budget. Again, I know last year's budget was pretty tight, so there were no special additions like that. But it's one more thing I can bring up for consideration. So.
You mentioned there's legislation for possible tax credit. What is that? Where's that stand? Is it something that we as a group can endorse or something? I mean,
I don't know where it stands currently. Just the last time I checked, it was still pending. I know they're going through a new legislative cycle, so something I can probably check in again on. But I know last year there was pending legislation for creating a historic rehabilitation tax credit.
Yeah.
So when somebody does rehab their historic property,
saw that.
residential, they can get a tax credit. Because currently, like I said, it's just limited to commercial properties, so.
Yeah.
Where do we go to support that?
Yeah.
Who is,
Augusta.
who is voting on this that we can
I
lobby
think
or
that
otherwise?
you,
And can we, as a body, is it out of our place to make a recommendation in support of something like this?
I don't know as a body, if there are rules around that, but on your personal time as a personal member of the public, you could reach out to your legislator to have them support that. So I can look up the bill for you and I can send you the information.
I mean, it'd be an interesting thing to send out a little flyer to everyone living in the historic districts and everyone who owns an historic structure designated as such, that this is a pending piece of legislation. If you would like to lobby for it, go for it.
I don't know,
mean,
well, we
see-
can't say that because we can't advocate for you to lobby somebody.
Well, I'm just, I'm, from a standpoint of, obviously, this is why we all are here. And so the question is, how do we make this go? We've had the discussion, and it's the real problem of the economics of trying to preserve and restore. And, we hit a roadblock every time we talk about that. And so this is, from my perspective, where the rubber meets the road. I mean, the economic piece that you just mentioned, Anne Marie, of there's an incentive to let your property fall apart so that the taxes go down. All of these things, plus the issue of, what went through with the last, gentleman saying, as I understand by that, this roof was gonna be too expensive, but he didn't have anything to back that up, but that's his excuse.
Right.
And so, and it's a very real thing as an historic,
Yeah.
homeowner,
So,
that, restoration is a lot more expensive than standard maintenance on a non-historic structure.
yeah.
And so this, to me, this is the major issue we're faced with in trying to make this happen. So having said that, if there is some glimmer of economic hope in a legislative process somewhere, I mean, anything we can do. I mean, as a private citizen, I'll go knock on the doors of people in the historic structure, not as a member of this committee, but, to say, hey, look, this is happening out here. We'd like to drum up support, like you'd go and ask somebody to sign a petition.
So the other thing that I can ask about is, sometimes the city manager will give council like a list of legislation that might be of interest for the city council to advocate for.
Yes,
So we can mention that as a possibility and maybe she can talk to them about it.
that'd be fabulous.
But it would have to pass through them, so.
And that's fine, I'm just, any direction. And as a private citizen, I mean, I can certainly knock on doors, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to have a particular approval from anyone to do that. But I am also not, I mean, I don't know what this legislation piece is, I don't know where it stands, I don't know what its number is, if there's a number, I don't know, I'm not part of the legislature, I don't know how it works
Let me find
exactly.
it, I'll find it and
So-
I'll send it to the commission.
That'd be
So,
great.
yeah.
Thank you, Lynn.
Beautiful.
Can I also ask a favor?
Okay.
So the church on Main Street, how do I find the owner of that church so that I can talk to them about
Should be a matter of public record.
public records?
Have you been on our parcel viewer, our online parcel viewer? So it's like, I don't know on the new city website, but you should see like city maps or in one of the drop downs, city maps, and then it's like our main map is the parcel viewer, and you can search by owner, you can search by address, and it'll pull up the owner name, so.
That's just for commercial, right?
No, it's everybody.
Everyone.
No,
Private
I'm,
property.
That's good.
Yeah.
so. Okay,
I'd like to ask a corollary question to one that Anne Marie brought up about enforcement, which is just to understand better. What is the enforcement process for things that this group puts forth? In other words, say we have an applicant who wants to, build an outhouse. And we say, well, it's okay to build the outhouse, but it has to be made out of wood because that's the appropriate material. They build it out of plastic. after getting approval from us to build it out of wood. What is the process that goes where there is a review of what has been done based on our approval to see if it meets what we have specified? And what are the ramifications for people to essentially do whatever they want regardless of what we have said?
So the whole process is, somebody comes in for a building permit, and our code enforcement office looks and sees if it's in a historic district or not. If they see it does, they send it to us,
Right?
and we get the application, it goes to you all. And then once if it's approved, we send that info to code enforcement again. And they look to make sure that, they'll go out in the field to make sure that it was done the way that it was supposed to be done per code enforcement and HPC's guidelines. And if it wasn't done that way, they'll do a notice of violation. I don't know all the ins and outs of their processes, but they do check to make sure that things were done.
What is the teeth in the enforcement if they did build the outhouse out of plastic? I mean, what is the ramification of that to the person who's done that in the end? I mean, what are the possibilities?
So again, I can't speak to exactly what code enforcement does, and Grace might have a better idea, but I know that there's potential for court action, there's potential for fines.
Violation. No, there's penalty.
Yeah, there's a penalty section in the code of ordinances for violations of the code, so.
And who would make the determination of what that penalty, or, I'm trying to get an idea of what actual teeth there is in enforcing what we do. Because if what we do can be, a minor fine, in the end covers over the non-compliance of the owner, it means we don't have a whole lot of real teeth, if you see what I'm saying. And I'm curious to know more about what that actually is. I mean, can they have the structure taken down and, force them to build it back the way it was told to them they needed to do it? Is it just a penalty where it's, okay, this is a, $2,500, outhouse, we're gonna, assess you a 10% fine? I just don't know what those things may be. In the sense that it would be nice as a member of the commission to have an idea of what our work is doing is actually then enforced, and that enforcement is useful.
So I do know in the past,
Yes.
with another
Yeah.
case, there was a person who put a fence up, and the fence was too high and not made of the right materials, and they didn't come to the HPC.
Okay,
And in the end, the fence had to come down. So
Good,
the fence
okay.
was removed,
All
and
right.
they had to put in an appropriate fence type and size.
okay. Great.
So
So there is,
something
okay,
happens
okay,
for
great,
that, there was enough incentive for that person to change.
good.
I don't know, after us, I don't know what happens. I don't know if it's code coming at them and saying
Right.
you have this many this many days and you're gonna be fined or whatever. But there was enough incentive for that person to remove a very expensive fence and put a new one up, so.
Okay,
Yeah,
And I don't know this is necessarily consequences, but I know in some circumstances, applicants have, I think, not received their certificate, have moved ahead anyway, and then asked for a blessing after the fact.
right, yeah,
That's
Sure.
the
No
point,
names
yeah.
named
Right.
mentioned.
and if that's sort of quote unquote allowed by a loose enforcement, then, what's the point of our,
The blessing after the fact comes from us, so if we choose to not, I call it a blessing, I guess it's issuing a certificate of appropriateness for work already done, I guess,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
or approval of design review, depending on what the criteria are.
I mean, yeah, you could choose to not grant it,
Yeah.
and they would have to revert back to what they had, so,
Right, which is probably what happened with the fence
okay.
yeah.
in the day.
Well, I'm glad to hear that we have an example of a real ramification.
Right, exactly.
I just don't know
And I
what
don't
that
know
process
how,
is.
I'm not sure how much that happens. I don't know why it happened at that point and not another time, you know what I mean?
Right.
I just know it did, because I was
Right.
like,
Okay.
that's it.
Yeah, I don't do code enforcement, so I don't know the ins and
Could
outs
we
of
ask
what they do, but.
code enforcement come and give us a short presentation?
Yeah, I
of-
can see
of this?
if Brenda could come in and talk to you about it.
I mean, if it's of interest to everyone
It
else,
would be
that's,
so smart, because I do know that after us, it does go to them.
Right.
And they do stuff, and I have no idea
right.
what happens, so.
It's an excellent idea.
Okay, it kind of help us,
Understand.
understand better.
To see the whole picture.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
That was a rousing and engaging discussion. Thank you, Emery. Thank you, Anya, for fielding the softball pitches. And I would like at this point to move on to our annual training, which is the next item on our agenda. Take it away, city staff.
Can you pull that up?
Sorry, I moved my fat head. All right, if it may be dark, we'll fall asleep.
That's okay.
Might even use my glasses.
Thank you.
I'll be needing these seasons. I hear that.
All right, are we all set? Yeah?
Everyone good?
Okay.
Okay.
So I think all of you have seen this before. So
good.
if you want me to skip past the part, let me know. But I'll just do what we usually do. So preserving Bangor's history, Bangor is important for many different reasons. In the past, we had a thriving lumber and mercantile industry. We've traditionally been the service and cultural center for northern and down east Maine. And we also serve as a gateway to other primary vacation spots like Bar Harbor and Katahdin. But Bangor also has a lot of uniqueness in and of itself. And I think our architecture tells that story. And also it tells a story of our connection to Boston culture and architecture. So why is preservation important? I think you all know why preservation is important, but for any members of the public, it really provides that sense of identity and preserving a sense of who we are as a city, provides a sense of place. A lot of our traditional historic towns and downtowns have a pedestrian scale, are attractive for small businesses, and create desirable, livable neighborhoods. And that benefits us economically because that's where a lot of people want to live, in those types of communities, especially younger people nowadays. They want to live in a walkable, thriving kind of urban environment. And they care about small businesses and things like that. Kind of going back to our traditional towns, they really kind of built like what we call now 15-minute city or complete neighborhood atmosphere. And that's really what we're finding is attractive to people to live in. And it also shows our community strength and the investment over time. Also, as we've talked about before, urban renewal happened and it really took a large part out of Bangor that was important. And I think it made people see like what we had and made them appreciate what we had. And so it's, makes people want to preserve more of our historic areas. Also, it's important that in the comprehensive plan, people really talked about wanting to preserve what made Bangor special and our neighborhoods and our identity. And as I mentioned previously, we do have some funds, CDBG funds for historic properties as facade grants. But I do think that's limited to just around the downtown area, so. As far as what's regulated in our code, we have historic districts, historic sites, and historic landmarks. We don't have any historic landmarks designated yet, but you all know we've talked about preservations of parks and some other places as potential landmarks for the future. Just a map of our historic districts. They're all obviously really centered around downtown and some of the areas, some of the neighborhoods kind of just outside of that.
Do you happen to know, if you're gonna ask a question, how they were designated? I mean, this is a long time ago they were designated, and how was it determined? I'm just curious.
I don't know the particular history of all the historic districts. Honestly, Mike might be able to answer that question
I would
better.
turn to Mike for that.
I could add a little bit. They began probably in the mid-70s, when preservation on the statewide level was becoming more common. Earl Shuttleworth was really helping communities to understand how important it was to get designations done. So many of them in Bangor started in, and the Historic National Register nominations started in the early 70s. So several of our districts, though, weren't created until the 80s, mid-80s or so. And then some more recent than that, as things get more and more refined, and districts which describe a kind of a neighborhood or a continuity of style or something
Right, sure.
that looks cohesive within that boundary.
Who makes the designation, the city council?
In our case, it was mostly Deborah Thompson working with the commission at the time.
This
That-
commission?
Yeah, well, the historic commission of that period.
I see, okay.
And they would describe a boundary like this. Now, you should know, and I'm sure you do, that not all of the properties or buildings within that district are necessarily historic. Some are
Sure,
non-contributing.
right, okay.
But that's important that the boundary at least contain those as well, because any impacts on those affects the rest of the district, so.
And I think one of the interesting changes is that the sort of definition or goals of a historic district have changed over time. I think in its earliest moment, it really was about the most beautiful, the wealthiest kinds of buildings.
Right,
And there's been a real development of thinking about other types of contributions
Yeah.
to historical significance.
And speaking to that, is there an ongoing review of areas to see what might be additional areas or?
Mike?
Well, you know, architectural surveys have been done. I think we're up to phase 3 or 4 now.
Right.
So those basically conclude with, here's a recommendation to the commission to consider either an expansion of this district or look at something special within the community that may be important to preserve at that time. So that base information is still available to the commission to refer to
Yep.
from those previous reports.
And we are, we got a grant to do phase 4 architectural surveys, looking at the Tree Streets area, some of the properties on State Street, and then the Bangor Grange, and then our parks as well, so.
I mean, you did present some of those findings.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, do we then take that and you're speaking of the commission, you mean this commission?
Right.
Do we have the authority to make a recommendation to city council or whatever that, this area for these reasons, based on the survey, we think should be now designated as historic area?
Yeah, that's what the process is that the commission
Okay.
makes a recommendation to council.
Okay,
But there is some paperwork that has to be done beforehand. We have to communicate with the state, and if we want it on the National Register, there's things that have to be done for that.
so is there a recurring agenda item at a certain period of time for this commission to make those reviews and consider?
We don't have one currently.
I think a lot really hinges on commissioners' level of energy and commitment. And that
Sure.
if one or two of us put our nose to the grindstone and get this stuff moving forward and put it on the agenda, then it will become part of the due course. But
Yeah.
it's sort of up to us to find the wherewithal to.
Well, that's great, because then we have some self-determinism about
I
that.
mean, there is a lot that we can do. I mean,
Right.
we've largely been a passive body waiting for
I'm advocating for less
applications to come to
passive,
us.
as you can
Right,
probably tell.
that is, we do have room to do that.
Okay.
Yeah,
For
I
sure.
mean, and I think in other towns with fewer staff, I think boards and commissions typically do a lot more work on their own. But the fact is, it's really just me and Brian, and we don't have a lot of time. So if you want to do the legwork and, in creating these designations, bringing something forward to the full commission, then I think we can do that, so.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of what's
Peter, I
possible.
think one strategy, and let's see if
Yeah.
Mike agrees, because he knows the ins and outs of this better than I,
Yeah.
would be for us to develop a stronger relationship with the State Office of Preservation.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
That, because we are one of the few local commissions in the state, so we do have a kind of status and place and access to certain types of funds that we have not really taken advantage of. And so the State Preservation Office, I
Yes.
think,
Perfect.
would
I was
be a
gonna
good
suggest
ally.
I've got a really good relationship.
Yeah.
With MHPC
Oh, really?
through my non-commission work,
Oh, good.
but it's more for archaeology.
So let's do it.
So, can I make a proposal that we as a commission have a strategic planning meeting to look at the big blocks of what we might make a difference in going forward in actions such as this?
Would you be interested in a separate meeting from this,
Yes.
which does have to be published, that if we're meeting as a commission to talk about this, or do you want it as an agenda item on our standing meeting
I think
times?
it's bigger than a single agenda
Fine, I'm
item
just
for.
checking
Just-
clarification.
I mean, I'm thinking about it from a standpoint of, my work setting, et cetera. We wanna move forward with something, we basically put forth a strategic planning retreat of sorts. You sit down and you say, what are our goals, what are we trying to do, and understanding we have limited resources is an important part of that.
Yeah.
In terms of what we can do.
But we
But
do, as staff, have to coordinate the meetings and do all that.
Sure, I
So,
understand.
yeah.
But I'm looking at this, somebody's done a lot of work in the past with making these areas, designating, writing the statutes or guidelines or whatever we call what we follow. Somebody's done that. It's
I think
been
we
a
had,
significant amount of
well, I
work.
think we
Yes.
had more
Do you have
staff.
a question, member of the public?
Oh, that's,
That is, hurts.
Yeah.
It's temporary.
You should also know that register nominations, whether you're doing it at the local level, to the state, or to the federal register, is a significant time sink, right?
Sure.
I'm sure Mike can tell you on the architecture side, the amount of work that goes into a single register nom. I can tell you on the archaeological side, the amount of work that goes into a single register nom at any level. Doing a district, where now you're looking at each individual contributing and non-contributing property within that district. I mean, you're talking a significant investment in time and energy, not trying to
I
poo-poo.
might be retiring soon.
Oh, yeah, well, muzzle top. But it's,
Well, no, I didn't, I'd have some time.
I'm not trying to pose it, I just
Oh, I
want to
understand.
make
No,
sure you know
no,
that, like,
yeah,
this-
sure,
we've got 4 criteria that we have to look at
sure.
each building, each structure, object, site, district, criteria that it meets, and there's so much that, it's a great idea. I think Bangor has a lot of historic, it should expand some of these districts.
Yeah.
But then also on the flip side, you've gotta have that homeowner, landowner, neighborhood buy-in on it as well, right?
Well, and I guess that's part of, your knowledge and understanding of this, Mike's, and all of this, from my perspective, is how we figure out, okay, can we strategically move forward to do X, Y, or Z, whatever our top priorities are,
Yeah.
kind of thing. I mean, I really like the idea of moving forward to make a difference in where, what this commission is gonna be doing in 20 years. And what teeth it will have or not to help either facilitate or enforce the important things that we're here for. See what I'm saying?
So I have a question. So stage 4, is that not what we're doing? Or is that,
It's more evaluating the potential for designation, and we can use that.
up to stage 4, like stage 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
has that already gone through?
yeah, those are all
Okay,
finished,
excellent.
yeah.
Okay, so we are moving forward with designations on things.
It's very-
Yeah.
recommendations.
But
There's
this is a
surveys.
good example of how we can be, I think one of our most limited resources is our own time.
Sure, I know,
Right.
And
I
so
hear that,
to
absolutely.
take the things that have been funded for the level 4 focus
Right.
and to really think carefully, all right, within that, we've got a bit of funding, we've got some energy there. Are there, what is the most crucial thing to us? What is the thing that
Well,
we're just
exactly.
gonna?
Yeah, no,
let
and
go?
prioritize and try and figure out where the biggest bang of our
Yeah,
time buck can be.
I think the parks are so important.
The what is, Rebecca?
The parks.
Parks, yeah.
Yeah,
Parks are,
for sure.
that's
Because
included in this
it makes
phase
it
4.
so unique for Bangor. Every single neighborhood has its own little
They
pocket
really
park.
are special.
They're so special. It's
Yeah.
not common in other areas,
Right.
so.
So, and yeah, that's one thing that we'll be looking at with phase 4, but one of the good things about these surveys is that they can provide us some of that background information if we do want to move forward with designation.
That's great.
I think the way that we can structure it is, first, we can send you the completed surveys, and you can look at those and see what's been recommended. And then I don't know, like, we could try and schedule a separate meeting just to discuss it, but it might be more feasible to add it as an agenda item to talk about your findings from the surveys and talk about if you all can come to an agreement on what you think should be designated. And if you feel strongly about it, I think it would be acceptable for the individual commissioners to do the research and background that would need to be done for designation once you come to an agreement, and then bring it all back together.
I'm fine with any format. I mean, recognizing that there are times like last month, there was no meeting. We didn't have any applications. Well, if we have extra time and, you know, we might be able to pull forward this agenda item when we have time and there are meetings available for it. Versus saying, we might need to float it a little bit in the sense that if we have 10 applications for one meeting, we're not gonna have time to talk about, you know, this sort of stuff.
You
But-
had mentioned a standing
Yeah.
agenda item, so to speak, that we could pick up or table or spend time on as we were able to do so.
That would be cool.
And I do want to note too, like, once you do come to an agreement about what you think should be designated, we do have to go to like a council committee, like business and economic development, to get their buy-in first and then bring it back to you and then take it back to council, so.
Well, maybe we could start with the discussion of the process so we understand it better and how much effort and time and everything in terms of, I mean, that's the stuff I find really exciting. I mean, the windows and stuff are important, don't get me wrong, but it's, you know, what we can create and make as a difference as we go forward.
Yeah.
I mean, we got people that really care here.
Yeah, I will say,
Yeah, I think that-
I will say, like with Hasey's Main Stages, the property owner was
That was
the
the name
one.
I couldn't get.
Yeah, he was
I
the
know,
one,
yeah.
he did all that background work, and so the staff part of it was really just to take it through the hoops.
Did
So,
anybody ever tell him that by getting his designation that he wanted all the things that he'd already done and renovating the place, he would have had to have permission from us to do? Anybody tell him that?
I don't know.
He knows it now. There is a part of the ordinance, though, that speaks very clearly about what the commission's duties and responsibilities are, which has to do with creating, noticing landmarks and historic districts in the process. So there's a whole section in there about that. I was gonna say that sometimes these get modified, even tweaked slightly. I recall on, a good example was a building on Franklin Street that Heather and, I'm trying to remember.
Abe?
Yes, and Abe Firth came forward with a new nomination to include that member in the
yeah,
district
that's right.
downtown.
Oh.
So there was a revision to that district to include that property, which was not at the time in the district.
Yeah.
So that happens too, refinement of the edges of these.
I came upon this wonderful study of Little City.
Yeah,
That's an historic study
Fascinating.
that it would provide a tremendous
Yeah.
background
Yeah.
to help designate that area.
That'd be cool.
It was probably done mid-20th century.
yeah.
There's a lot in Little City that's,
Yeah,
It's right near the Hasties Main Station building.
Again, parks, you know, the
Yes.
park.
have you seen it, Mike, the one
I've
I'm
read
talking
that,
about?
yeah.
It's probably Sarah Martin's
Might have
thesis.
been. Yeah, I think it was. I
Oh,
think it was
it's
Sarah.
excellent.
I'd
Well,
love
did
to
you
see
see
it.
it?
I haven't
Should find- yeah, we should gather those.
I'll have one minute, I'd love to read it.
Yeah, we find a copy for it.
I have a digital copy, I'll send it around. That'd be
That would be great.
Cool.
Anya, I'm sure
So
you're
I'm
gonna
sorry to-
continue.
I apologize.
No, it's
to-
okay,
We get
to
sidetracked.
derail you here.
it's okay. Do you all want me to go through all the historic districts, or would you rather me skip past that to other parts?
You could maybe click through them, just so we have a visual.
Yeah, just a
Okay.
little,
So what's that district?
This one is the Theological Seminary.
Yes.
Yeah, so one of the oldest in the country, which is interesting. And this one is the Broadway Historic District. This is one of our best-known districts. And it has a lot of different styles in it, and had some famous people that lived there,
And John Baptist.
and John Baptist. This is our Great Fire of 1911 Historic District, and obviously one of our core business districts. And this had post-fire Boston architect Warren Manning drew the city plan, and really taking into account the rise of the automobile, so. This is the High Street Historic District, so just right outside of downtown, and has a lot of residential homes, but also like some commercial development mixed in there.
Not on that one, Thomas Hill is.
The Thomas Hills Zone.
Yeah. Main Street Historic District, another big part of our core business district.
That includes your church.
Yeah,
And the Bangor House across the street.
yeah. This is the State Street Historic District,
That's
just
my
has a
favorite.
few in there. Again, we're looking at State Street in our fourth phase of our historic survey, so,
The pocket district.
yeah.
Cool.
Thomas Hill Historic District, obviously has the standpipe, so famous for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
West Market Square Historic District, this and Broadway were two of the first districts for the city. So, and this was done in response mainly to urban renewal,
Yeah.
so. Oops. And then last is Whitney Park Historic District, obviously, has a lot of very large residential homes and significant people who lived there in the past. So, are we all set with those? Okay. So as far as the basics of the commission, you are all pretty familiar with the process, but I'm adding in a new process with the findings here. Obviously, you're made up of members and then officers. You take votes to approve or disapprove applications. Mike here is our awesome consultant who gives you great advice about applications. And I said this before too, but just it's important to be clear about what you're approving when you do make votes on the application, so the applicants know exactly what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do when they leave. Meetings are once a month. They did used to be more than once a month because I think we had a lot more applications coming in. I think we had fewer provisions for in-house staff review, which is mainly just when people are doing stuff in kind and they're not really changing much. And so I think it goes to show that we are just having more people do stuff like that rather than major changes. And then also it is important that you use the National Park Service guidelines for when you do review things, whether it's rehabilitation or preservation. So people have to come to you when they're wanting to do an exterior renovation, new construction, demolish or move. You know, I haven't seen any applications to demolish or move anything since I've been here. So it's mainly just exterior renovation work. Internal review for staff review, that's really anything that doesn't materially alter or affect the historical or architectural character of the building or structure. The people who sign off are chair of the commission, code enforcement officer, and then planning officer. And any of us, if we feel like it needs to go to the full commission, we can say that it will go to the full commission.
Anya, would that include things like signage, you know?
Signage is typically a staff review, yep.
Yep.
And what is exempt is interior work, landscaping, paint color, and public art. How is HPC empowered to do these things? Two primary things. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution talks about states' rights and police powers. And primarily police powers as far as zoning, that kind of covers HPC, that historic preservation rules. Things that govern aesthetics and things like that, health, safety, and welfare. And then the main Supreme Court case, Penn Central Transportation versus City of New York, 1978, that was the landmark case on historic preservation. The background on that is in New York, there was a train station that was beloved by many that got destroyed. And because there was a huge public outcry about it, the city developed historic preservation rules, and then a company wanted to come in and destroy Penn Central Station and build a skyscraper, And the Historic Preservation Commission there ruled, no, they couldn't do that. And so the company sued and said, you know, you took away my economic potential on this property. And the Supreme Court basically said that, A, they still had some economic potential because they could use it as a train station, and that the city was empowered to have these regulations on historic properties. And they have it's mentioned in a later slide, but there's a 3-part analysis that the courts would do to determine whether it's a taking or if something's allowable under that. So it was very critical for historic preservation. As far as local codes, we have chapter 148 for historic preservation, and then chapter 71 for the Bangor Center Revitalization Area, also called the Facade District. Revitalization area is a little bit different since it has some different parameters than the historic review, but they kind of have some overlap too. And then there's the Secretary of Interior Standards, which our codes try to mirror that for historic preservation. And I'm just going to go and read through the different ones. So rehabilitation is defined as the process of returning a property to a state of utility through repair or alteration, which makes possible an efficient contemporary use while preserving those portions and features of the property which are significant to its historic, architectural, and cultural values. Preservation is defined as the act or process of applying measures necessary to sustain the existing form, integrity, and materials of a historic property. And restoration is defined as the act or process of accurately depicting the form, features, and character of a property as it appeared at a particular period of time by means of the removal of features from other periods in its history and reconstruction of missing features from the restoration period. So that's what that involves. And you can find the specifics on the National Park Service website. So again, as far as design review in the revitalization area, you have some more ability to look at compatibility with surroundings and allow for more artistic pursuits. And it kind of goes outside of traditional historic preservation. But it's good for downtown from a design perspective to have that mixing of new and old. And so the purpose of the revitalization area is to really encourage that interplay between our past and our future. It might be a good time now to kind of talk about the facade district, because there is a sense that the facade district, it does have overlap with the historic district. So there has been suggestions to get rid of the facade district, but add design guidelines to the whole downtown development district, and then also expand the historic district, some of those downtown, to include more buildings. And so it would be interesting just to get your thoughts on that, and because it might make things simpler, and it would broaden design guidelines to more buildings that are not currently in the facade district. So
If I remember, that was addressed in one of the phases, maybe phase 2 architectural survey.
yeah,
That concluded with, here's the overlap of these two districts. Here's what could be done. Of those, maybe a half a dozen or 10 were cited as maybe going into the historic districts.
That is perhaps something we could talk about
Yeah.
early in your standing
Yeah,
conversational part.
that'd be great.
yeah, I think it would be more critical to look at those buildings that we might want to look at in downtown adding to a historic district, because I do think it's probably a sooner rather than later thing to get rid of the facade district.
Yeah.
And as we're updating our land development code, add in those design guidelines to the downtown. So definitely something to discuss.
Definitely.
Any other thoughts on that before I move on? Okay. I don't know how much more I need to go over on this. I think we talked a lot about this already. So unless y'all want me to talk about it again, I'll move on. So Bangor is a certified local government. I think we were one of the first in the state to have regulatory practices for historic preservation. And we're also considered one of the leading communities in the state for historic preservation. Being a certified local government does open us up to more funding opportunities, like we can get the grant that we got to help fund Mike's work on some of our historic surveys. And it's just really great that we have that recognition overall at the state level. So I mentioned the Penn Central takings inquiry. I think just one more thing to get out with that is that there is a lot of case law that says if a regulation goes too far, it can be considered a taking. So when we look at regulations, we try to balance, that so that we're not creating a regulatory taking, essentially. You have to make sure that there is some kind of reasonable and beneficial use of a property when you create regulations. As far as due process, there's a lot of different things involved in ensuring that we are following due process, providing adequate notice to abutters, providing the public and the applicant the adequate opportunity to be heard, being impartial when making decisions, and keeping an adequate record, making sure that we're not discriminating, things like that. Again, when you're voting on standards, being very clear about why you feel it doesn't meet a standard, if you do feel it doesn't meet one, and talking about that beforehand. It also helps if you think that the commission is going to vote to not, that it doesn't meet a standard, you can ask the applicant to come back with a change before you make a final vote on the project. And again, just having things be very objective and stating those reasons for the standards, it helps avoid the appearance of being arbitrary with decisions. So, on conflicts of interest. So just to clear some things up after the last meeting, and I will actually read this section of the conflict of interest code that talks about this, but basically you shouldn't take a vote on anything where you or a member of your family has a financial or personal interest. And if you believe there's a conflict, you need to disclose it at the beginning of the meeting. And Grace is going to hand out the conflict of interest language.
So you can see the definition of
Yeah.
the special and financial interests, as well as like the actual part of the code.
Just an extra one, I think.
Yeah, so specifically it says something where you have a financial or special interest other than an interest held by the public generally. So it's really important if you do bring up a conflict to be very clear in your language about your potential relationship with someone or your potential conflict so that the commission can decide whether that is a conflict. So does anybody have questions on that? Okay. Some other things to note are that you want to avoid discussing agenda items outside of meetings because you are a regulatory body. Everything has to be open records, open public meetings. So you need to discuss things at meetings. You also, at meetings, you should avoid discussing things that aren't on an agenda unless at the beginning the chair brings it up and can add something to the agenda. But it more so applies in cases where like you decided on an application and then, it comes up for discussion at a later meeting after you've already decided on it, particularly if it falls within the 30-day appeal period. You just want to be careful about discussing things like that.
So, yeah.
Please.
I was gonna say, so you're at the grocery store and somebody corners you and says, that house down the street, that really shouldn't be allowed to do the blah, blah, blah. You're standing there as a commission member and you kind of have to say, well, I really can't be discussing this. You're welcome to attend the meeting that's coming up, or public hearing, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Because otherwise, and the other one that always surprised me was that commissions couldn't as a group go and review a property unless they advertised it.
Like, you
If it's
can,
good,
but you
if
have
it's
to advertise it.
Yeah,
It's a
and
meeting to go do that.
it is, and the whole commission is supposed to go view the property if that's decided to happen. Because if only one commissioner goes to view it, then they could have a special bias over others, so.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry, Peter, you were.
Oh, no, I was just gonna make a comment, you know, you mentioned making sure things are on the agenda. Just a thought regarding the agenda, some of the meetings I go to, it's part of protocol that at the very beginning, they ask if there's any additions to the agenda. As a, just a, you know, right at the top of the meeting, and just say, are there additions? The concept of what we're wanting to do is be very clear that what we're discussing is clearly part of the agenda we're doing or whatever, that, you know, that might just be a nice thing to, or a way to do it, to formalize it.
Yeah, I think that would make sense for the chair to maybe take on.
I'll add it to the script,
Okay.
Sweet. Cool.
which I will send to all of you in case Liam and I are both not here.
Oh, there you go.
No.
And then also, you shouldn't occupy any other office if the duties are incompatible with the duties on the commission. Grace might be getting into some more of these later, but I just want to just breeze through them real quick. You shouldn't disclose any confidential information if you happen to have that. On social media, it's important to distinguish between personal opinion and comments made in official capacity. Also, if you're notified by the press about something, you can talk to them, but just let us know if you can, just so we can let city council know that there's a story forthcoming about the city. Because we have had like planning board chair talk to the press about things, and it's good to know, so. Again, be careful about personal discourse and using your title as a commissioner. You shouldn't accept any gifts, obviously, due to your position, and you can't use public property for private purposes. So, that's all I had. If there are questions about those in particular, Grace is gonna do her legal training, and she'll probably cover some more of that too, so.
Is this the city solicitor ratings? Based on the fund?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I didn't realize that was up until I was like sitting over there for like half an hour. Like, oh, I just up there. I'm gonna hopefully do a quick training. We've been in court all day, so I'm kind of losing it a little bit. But, so Anya covered due process a little bit, and I just wanted to say that, the Freedom of Access Act, which is gonna be a heavy part of my training, is, it assists in due process, which is why you have to send out that notice and that kind of thing, just so that everybody knows what the government is doing. So getting into the Freedom of Access Act, it's a state statute that the Maine legislature passed, and its purpose is that the actions of public bodies be taken openly, and that records of its actions be open to public inspection. The idea of FOA is that public proceedings exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. So there are two prongs of FOA. There are records, and then there are public proceedings. So records are emails, notes, any of the packets that you guys might get. Those kinds of things are open to public inspection. So we always recommend that you have your own email for like the commission specifically, because if you're using your personal email, then you could tend to get into, well, is this personal email also going to be, you know, publicly requested? And then, you know, you don't want to get into that. So just kind of keeping your historic preservation stuff separate from your personal stuff. We do get these records requests a lot, but I don't think I've ever gotten one for HPC, but it's possible. We are getting more and more every day. And then public proceedings is the other prong. So this is just going into like ex parte communication. So if, like your example of somebody coming up to you at the grocery store and asking you a question, or you know, if you do a site visit or something like that, that would not be permissible under FOA unless you advertised it and let the public come as well. So, does anyone have any questions about FOA? That was kind of a quick, broad overview, but it's just, you know, making sure that everything you do is on the up and up, and that you wouldn't be afraid to have your mother read your email. So I'm gonna get into the code of ethics now. So I know that we did have an issue with the conflicts of interest, so I'm gonna read you my whole spiel here. Commission members are not permitted to participate in the deliberation or vote or otherwise take any part in the decision-making process on any agenda item before their collective body in which they or a member of their immediate family has a financial or special interest other than an interest held by the public generally. Any commission members who believe that they might have a conflict must disclose the conflict to the commission by the beginning of the commission meeting. When in doubt, it's always best to err on the side of disclosure. Once a conflict is disclosed, the commission shall vote based on the facts before them whether an individual has financial or special interest with respect to the agenda item concerned. Commission members should avoid the appearance of conflict by disclosure or abstention. So once you've disclosed that you have a conflict and you've been voted off the island, then you should leave the room and not participate in the discussion or the vote, and then they'll call you back once that item is over with.
But what about the public access piece of that? I mean, you have to leave the room, but is that during a meeting where the general public can be there?
Well, you should leave the dais, I guess I should
Okay,
say. We usually just have them leave, but if you would like to stay, you can. It's just, we don't want, any thought that you're participating at all in that deliberation.
I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah, no, I get it.
You could have the
It's a good question.
public sitting in the room
Yeah.
and you're not allowed to sit.
I also think because the standard is often an appearance of a conflict.
Sure.
And so one might feel that even being in the room would give an appearance. It doesn't have to actually be a conflict.
That's reasonable.
It does state that they shall remove themselves from the meeting room
Okay.
in our code of ethics.
I had to do that once, I just stepped outside. I mean, I could hear everything though,
But we couldn't see your eyebrows.
Yeah, that's right. I just put a blanket on it.
No, I just want to clarify, that's fine.
No, it's a good
Expressions on your
question.
face.
No, it's a good question. And the legal department is available if you guys think that there's gonna have something come up or something like that. And, it's always best to, if you think of a question to ask someone who's disclosing a conflict, go ahead and ask it. Because that's all I would do, is just start asking questions about what do you think your conflict is.
We can always take the US Supreme Court as our guidance.
Well, I don't know. Stupid.
So going on to gifts, commission members may not accept gifts, favors, or other things of value in return for a decision. That's a pretty obvious one. And then confidential information, that one's a little complicated because like I said, BOA, a lot of our documents are public documents. There are like limited statutory exceptions, and those are extremely narrow exceptions. But sometimes information is flagged as confidential and that information cannot be disclosed.
But our packets are public information, I presume?
They are, yeah, so,
Who would flag them if something is confidential? I'm just curious.
we would before the fact, so we will, let you all know. Did you have a question?
No, I was gonna point out, the rare event that there was archaeological information or site information, locational data
Yeah.
related to archaeological sites, that's confidential information, it can't be
Oh,
disclosed to
really
the general
interesting.
public.
I didn't know that. Wow.
And sometimes like trade secrets and that kind of thing, I
Oh.
don't know if you guys would have that, but, I know like the Board of Assessment Review, they sometimes evaluate things like, with specific companies in the area, and they have to look at some of their stuff, so that's confidential.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then my final one is just on social media. I spent a lot of time on that last year, and I think you all were here for that. That was just like one thing, and this year is my conflicts of interest. But social media is, you need to disclose on your social media page or in your post if you're acting in your personal private capacity and not as a representative of the city. So for example, on my social media pages, I just say, the views that I express on this site are my own. Just because I don't want to get anybody confused. I'm not representing the city in my social media or anything like that. So, do you guys have any questions? I know that was pretty quick, but just kind of a broad overview of everything.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have for training, so,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Anya, I'm curious about your background as a planner. I realize I don't really know where you came from and how
Please
you...
take the podium. Tell us about yourself.
So,
this job was actually kind of a career change for me. My background was in North Carolina. I really just did GIS work primarily. I did previously have like a pretty lengthy internship with a planning office. And then before that, my degree was in environmental science, natural resource management. So when I took this job, it started off more as like a mix between GIS and planning, and then it's kind of morphed into just planning. We both do a little bit of GIS, regardless in our job, but yeah, that's really my big background. So
Great.
yeah.
Did you want to grill Brian?
I was gonna ask Brian the same question.
Of course. So I went to school in Poughkeepsie at Vassar, and I got my degree in history for my bachelor's. And then in the summer, I did some stream mapping up in Greenville, knew I loved Maine. And also in college, I did an internship in the county of Dutchess in New York. Did some transportation planning with them, and that's how it all dovetailed together.
Well, thank you both for what you do.
Yeah.
It's really, you do a good job, and
Thank
it's
you.
really helps us tremendously to have some idea of what to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Brian was gonna, I think, lead this last one on ADUs.
Sure.
So,
Happy New Year, guys. Yeah, everyone's had a good New Year.
And to you?
So earlier this month, there was a NAPC training about ADUs, and I know that's perfect timing because nationally and locally, all these preservation commissions are thinking about ADUs, especially because it's such a hot topic issue these days. So I figured we could use that as a way to start thinking about evaluation standards and things like that. So the state of Maine has a statute that at least one accessory dwelling unit must be allowed on any lot where a single-family dwelling unit is the principal structure. So that's the state of Maine. And then for Bangor, in our land development code ordinances, it states that ADU square footage may not be more than 50% of the square footage of the principal dwelling or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. So grounding yourself in those two statutes, I want to talk a little more about the workshop that happened on that NAPC video, because I think it'd be a good idea for you guys to just have an understanding of what other communities are doing and what other communities are thinking about when they're thinking about ADUs in historic districts. So, in the webinar, there were 3 cities, Denver, Nashville, and Louisville, so very comparable cities.
Clearly.
But we do have a lot of historic districts and a lot of historic sites. So some takeaways from that video was, in Denver, they were overall favorable towards ADUs because they increased density in their urban core. And their code specifically requires that ADUs, and I quote, must look compatible and the owner must live on the property. And then in that video, one board member went on to speak on how they valued when reviewing ADUs, subordination to the primary building, and a different member spoke about visibility of the ADU from the street. So that's what they're thinking about in Denver. And they posited these 2 big questions to ask. Does the development change the characteristic of the lot? And how does the development relate to the existing building? So that was Denver. And then Nashville, their code required that ADUs should be compatible by not contrasting greatly with surrounding historic ADUs. So in the review process in Nashville, they actually differentiated their evaluation standards between corner lots and non-corner lots, thinking about that visibility aspect, what other communities are doing. And then that one ended with the city staff implored commissions to develop design review guidelines. And then for Louisville, they have different standards for new construction versus additions. So that's thinking about detached ADUs versus attached ADUs. And the board members there, they really valued ADU placement on the lot, subordination to the primary structure, and interestingly, complementary vertical and horizontal design planes when thinking about your surrounding areas. So those are 3 communities. That's what they're thinking about. That's what they're dealing with. Could help, could nuance what we think. So that was what the NAPC webinar was about.
So Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but any addition or any new work on properties in historic districts would, as well as the ADU requirements, would also have to pass the commission's review as being acceptable based on the standards of this ordinance.
Yes,
Yeah. So that makes it a little bit even more complicated to fit. What I've seen happen in some communities in New England especially is carriage houses, and you know how we have the prototype of the main house and the L and then the
Yes.
back house or the barn.
Yep.
Oftentimes those ADUs are the primary house is kept to the owner, and in the back portion, the L could be another unit or two, and then the barn itself or outstructures could be considered for ADUs as well. We haven't seen that in Bangor yet, but that's a model in Massachusetts that's taken off. So don't be surprised if you see it someday.
So what is our current standing with ADU in the city?
The city, well, Brian was just saying, the state of Maine basically wrote language that applied to the entire state of Maine, if I remember.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we already allowed ADUs anywhere a single-family home was allowed before that. We just have some standards on it in the land development code. One of the primary limitations is that they can't be more than 50% of the square footage of the primary structure or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less.
Right.
But again, you know, if somebody were proposing one in a historic district, it would fall under the new construction standards in the historic preservation code, so.
And it would apply to existing structure that was not a dwelling unit, that would be turned into a dwelling unit? We were talking about
could.
new construction versus renovation of, say, your barn?
Yeah, well, if it's just interior, then it wouldn't come to HPC. Somebody could do that if they want to renovate a barn into an ADU. I guess I was just primarily thinking if somebody built like a new ADU on their property.
I see, okay.
Right.
Yeah. Or added on, you can add on to an existing structure. So that would also come to you, if somebody did that.
Gotcha.
Did any of the commissioners go to that webinar and have any thoughts or? No? Okay.
Okay.
Any thoughts on, you know, what's in what Brian described or anything like that?
Thought it out now.
Well, but I think there are some similar characteristics between what you described in those three locations that they're working on. I certainly would feel that everything they said were things that would make sense to be addressing and thinking about in ADUs. I mean, frankly, whether it's historic property or not, I'd like to see that ADUs put up as accessory living anywhere would fit with the prime structure. You know, that'd be nice.
That would be great.
You know, so I mean, this concept of size being, you know, the primary structure being the primary structure and the ADU being clearly secondary. The design considerations are similar. I thought it was interesting, the horizontal and vertical plane stuff you're talking about, because that is interesting, kind of really covers a lot of what the impact visually will be. You know, it's maybe not specific, but at least it's a way of considering consistency in the structures. I mean, it just seems like those sorts of things would be important. I would think that a lot of those things that were discussed would come under what we already do for historic areas and be under the purview of our review, you know, which is good.
Well, it's in a historic district for sure.
Well, right, that's what I mean, and then, so that's good. I mean, are we thinking we should be developing something specific regarding our reviews of ADUs in the historic districts? Is that what kind of getting towards, or no, or?
Well, we are potentially looking at the historic preservation code more closely this year, and so potentially it's something we can look at adding ADU design standards, so.
I think that would be smart.
So if there are recommendations you want to have to the Historic Preservation Code sooner rather than later, would probably be good to make
Yeah.
a recommendation.
I think the next meeting, I was gonna have a more in-depth discussion on the commission's priorities for preservation, kind of help guide our work for the codes. I was gonna do it tonight, but it's getting kind of late. So yeah,
I think that'd be good.
okay.
Well, what comes to mind is the commission reviewed, and I can't remember how long ago it was, but within the last few years, a vacant piece of property that the city owned, I think on the corner of
Yep.
Union and Pond, maybe?
Yeah,
Yep.
I know that property.
And that was, you remember there were two structures, there was
Right.
one,
Right.
a larger one, and then one smaller one in the back. And I think that was before the ADU discussions on the state moving forward with that. But the intent generally is that we create more housing opportunities, really, right?
Yeah, and having some guidelines for that would be great, for sure, so can you, sorry, Brian, can you tell me which city was the one that said that the owner had to be living on the?
Like that.
Doesn't Bangor,
Is Bangor
might.
as well?
That was Denver.
That's Denver.
That's a few other communities too. though.
Okay,
yeah, that's
I'm
important.
not sure planning wise though, if that's best practice, because it can be construed as exclusionary. And I also don't know how well we can enforce that, to be honest. So I think it would be wiser to focus on the appearance. And you brought up a good point, the application on Pond and Union, it kind of highlighted, like, it would be really good to have firm guidelines on what the commission wants to see for new construction
right.
in historic districts, so.
Brian, would you have time to just put a little bullet list together of those things you just told us in these different areas? So as a departure point for discussion at the agenda item next time?
Sure, we could just send this over.
Yeah, no, that'd be good.
You could also just include it in the minutes too.
Well,
Which
that's
are
a
going
good
to be
way
extensive.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, what do you need from us? Are we doing that next time in terms of what we want for guidelines for the AD?
I guess just think about what you would want for new construction in general, I guess, and that can vary based on the historic district. Some of the questions I was gonna ask were like, do you all have different goals for different districts? Is something more important in one district than another district? Kind of things like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think about that one a lot, actually.
Yeah, because maybe we have different standards for different districts. I mean, we still have to kind of mirror the Secretary of Interior standards, but maybe there's some more fleshing out we can do.
Yeah.
Or is that desirable? Maybe think about that. Do you want to do that?
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I have only one question,
Okay.
and then I'll happily will end the meeting for you. Do we have changes to alternate members versus regular members for this year?
That's a good question.
If we don't know yet, if I can, at some point, I'd like to know.
Let me look at that. I'm not sure. I'll let you know.
Okay. In which case, unless there's anything else that you would like to Hail Mary into the meeting for the end of the night. No community member king. I will use my one and only power to end the meeting with this. Thank you, everyone.